Well, hello and welcome to another Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. I do hope that you are doing well. Behind me are some pictures of 5 different individuals, or 6 different individuals, because one has got 2 people on it. And I wonder who of these you recognise, and I wonder if you can work out what things they have in common. So have a think about that for a moment, give me a pause, and see if you can work out who these people are. Okay, so I wonder if you recognised Martin Luther King, maybe Gandhi, maybe Nelson Mandela, maybe you recognised, well, maybe you didn't recognise the others. So there's Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson, and there's a bloke called Jammer. Now, all of these people are people who have, dare I say it, broken the law. They are people who have gone against things because they've put their faith and their understanding about life first. And that really is what we are thinking about today. We're doing a unit about sin and forgiveness and crime, and this one today we're thinking about with regards to, is it right to put your faith before and actually is that it, should you put your faith before the law? So here you've got Martin Luther King. He broke the law by daring to suggest that black people were the same as white people. You've got Gandhi, who dared to suggest that there were some people that actually were important, even though they were called the Dalits or the Untouchables. So he went against people there. And then you've got Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson, who they believed that having sex before marriage was not acceptable because the Bible said that. And as committed Christians, and it was a bed and breakfast, so it was their own house, they let people stay out, that they actually had that rule, and that was in their terms and conditions. And this was a few years back before gay marriage was actually legalised, and a couple came to their house that were male and wanted to stay in the same room, and they weren't allowed. And Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson pointed out to the clause saying that unmarried people were not allowed to be in the same room together. And this couple took Mr. and Mrs. Wilkinson to court and actually won for discrimination. And the reason was that they won was that gay people were unable to get married at that point. So they said that rule was there to discriminate against that. And then you've got Jammer. Jammer is a Christian who lived in Saudi Arabia. He was a Muslim, he converted to Christianity, he put his faith first, and he had to escape from Saudi Arabia because at that point it was illegal to convert from Islam to Christianity. So these are all people that have things in common. They all put their beliefs and their faith before the law, and they all had a punishment for that. But the question needs to be, were they right to break the law? Was that an acceptable thing for them to do? So have a think about that while we listen to our cheesy intro sequence. Okay, so our title for today is Should We Put Faith Before the Law? Okay, and we're going to explore the difference between sin and a crime, and we're going to look at those differences today as well. So there's your title. Please make sure that you get it written down. As usual, do pause me as we go. It's going to be good if you can explain the differences between sins and crimes. It's going to be great if you can give examples of how some crimes may not be sins, and it's going to be even better if you can suggest Christian teachings to support difficult choices. So we're going to do a little bit of analysis of text. We're going to do some team workers. Maybe you're going to be working with some other people, hopefully, over the phones, and we're going to think about our Christian value of integrity, because having integrity is obviously really, really, really important. So there's lots that we're going to be covering today. I'm not going to bother going over all that with you, but I'm sure you can see that behind me. So let's just start off with defining what sin and crime is. And we talked about sin last time, so you should be okay with this. What I'd like you to do is to pause me and write down what you understand by the terms sin and crime. So let's pause me now. What's a sin and what's a crime? Okay, I found this very helpful little clip that I'd like you to watch, which goes into that a little bit more. Check your answers, make any changes you need to.
We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. But with our inescapable sinful nature, does that mean we are all criminals? I used to teach political science courses. One of my favorite questions to ask college students was, what is the difference between sin and crime? Think about it for a minute. Sin is an attitude or action that transgresses the will of God. Crime is a behavior that has been declared illegal by a civil government. From a Christian perspective, sin is the weightier matter. Sin is not only more important because God defines it, but also because it's broader or more encompassing than crime. As a Christian, I believe that atheism is a sin, but I don't think it should be a crime. I believe profanity is a sin, but I don't think speaking profanity should be a crime. I believe idolatry is a sin, but I don't want this idolatry declared illegal. The reverse can also be true. For example, I believe that abortion is a sin and should be a crime. Sin and crime are not one and the same, but how we define them says much about the nature of a free society.
Okay, so what crimes do you know of? Okay, so I'd like you to make a list of crimes. Now, bearing in mind we've talked quite extensively about this already. Try and come up with a list of 10 to 15 crimes that you know of, things that are illegal, and then number those as well from the biggest crime to the least biggest crime, and then come back to me. Which then leads to the question of, are all crimes sin? Okay, and what's the difference between a sin and actually the church often talks about 7 deadly sins, and I'm sure that's a phrase that you've heard of, but I wonder if you know what those 7 deadly sins are, and are they actually that bad? So I found a fantastic clip from SpongeBob SquarePants that I'm going to show you, and if it doesn't work for some reason because of copyright blocking, I will make sure that I've got it in the Google Drive link below. So what I need you to do is to write out the 7 deadly sins as they appear. Thank you to SpongeBob, and leave a couple of lines blank while you're doing this. So you just write the 7 deadly sins out as they appear on the screen, and leave 2 lines blank between each one. And I'll give you the second task after you've seen this. So let's watch this now, and then as I say, as you go through, just write down each one, leaving 2 gaps.
Over the course of the past 2 decades, we have followed the adventures of SpongeBob SquarePants and his friends in the underwater city of Bikini Bottom. A lot can be said about the characters in the show and all of their eccentricities, but some viewers have found similarities between them and the 7 deadly sins. But before we get into it, make sure you subscribe. In the Bible, sloth is described as excessive laziness, and Patrick certainly fits the bill. If the fact that he lives under a rock isn't convincing enough, in the episode Big Pink Loser, he's given the award for doing absolutely nothing longer than anyone else. In addition to being the epitome of laziness, sloth is also the failure to utilize the talents you have. Patrick is shown to have remarkable strength, having the ability to lift the rock he sleeps under without trouble. He becomes a karate master in Karate Star, but only uses the power to do things like steal ice cream. It's clear that Patrick mostly uses his incredible strength as a means to indulge in his own laziness. Lust is usually seen as excessive sexual desire. However, there is an alternative definition of lust as a passionate desire for something. Taking that into consideration, it's easy to see that SpongeBob is a very lustful character. With his unending optimism and friendliness, SpongeBob certainly harbors an excessive amount of love for his friends in Bikini Bottom. So blinded by love that he is oblivious to the fact that Squidward finds him annoying. He lusts for life and loves the affection from both friends and foes, often stopping at nothing to finish a task. Represented by Gary, gluttony is the continual consumption of food or drink. Throughout the series, Gary doesn't do a whole lot other than eat and meow, the latter usually because he's hungry. In the series, it is eventually revealed that Gary descends from royalty. Maybe his tendency towards gluttony is related to the lavish lifestyle of the very wealthy. Greed is marked by an excessive love for money and material goods. The most obvious out of all of them, Mr. Krabs is the perfect embodiment of this trait. He refers to customers in monetary terms.
Okay, money! Children!
And runs the Krusty Krab under the philosophy, the money is always right. Throughout the series, Mr. Krabs has shown a shocking dedication to his money. He keeps his first dollar framed and prominently displayed in his home, and is willing to do just about anything to make a profit. Plankton, who spends his days trying to steal the Krusty Krab's secret formula, is envy. Envy is the intense desire to have an item that someone else possesses, and almost every one of Plankton's storylines revolves around his obsessive need to one-up Mr. Krabs. He's even, literally, green with envy. When it comes to wrath and pride, the internet is in hot debate as to whether Squidward is wrath and Sandy is pride, or if it's the other way around. Popular opinion is that Squidward is wrath and Sandy is pride. Squidward, with his uncontrollable hatred towards the world in general, spends most of his life angry and is usually hating on SpongeBob. And pride, which is an excessive view of oneself without regard for others, could certainly describe Sandy. The first time she meets SpongeBob, she invites him in for tea in her underwater air dome. She doesn't even consider how a sea creature might react to water deprivation, resulting in SpongeBob's near-death experience. Sandy, taking such pride in her Texas-bred land mammal status, fails to recognize the needs of her underwater friend. However, some argue that Squidward is closer to pride, while Sandy is closer to wrath, due to Squidward's condescending nature and Sandy's hot-headed tendencies. If you like this video, make sure...
Okay, so with that now, watch what I'd like you to do is to explain why Christians find that these things are not helpful for their walk with God. So why is gluttony not helpful in their walk for God, for example? So go through those 7 deadly sins, and in those gaps now, I want you to start just filling out some information about why they're unhelpful for a walk with God, and understanding about what it is to be a Christian. So this lesson, we said it'd be good if you could talk about the key difference between sin and a crime, and I think we've done that quite well. Great if you can talk about some examples of crimes, and we've talked about whether those crimes are actually sins or not, because can you make a difference between the two, and even better if you can use some Christian teachings, and that's what we're going to go on to think about now. So I'm going to give you a situation here, and I'd like you to think about what you think should happen. So this is a passage from Mark's Gospel, and this is what's said. Later in the leaders sent some Pharisees and supporters of Herod to trap Jesus into saying something for which he could be arrested. Teacher, they said, we know how honest you are. You are impartial and don't play favourites. You teach the way of God truthfully. Now tell us, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay them or shouldn't we? So a tax was something that was very unpopular. Obviously, it's a proportion of your money that gets paid to the king. In this case, Caesar the king. Jesus saw through their hypocrisy and said, why are you trying to trap me? Show me a Roman coin and I'll tell you. So they handed it to him. And they said, and he said, whose picture's on this? And they said, it's Caesar's. Well then, said Jesus, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and give to God what belongs to God. The issue is the Pharisees are the Jewish religious leaders at the time, and they're trying to trip Jesus up into saying that it's okay to support the king, even though actually God should be their king, so they shouldn't have anything to do with Rome. So what I'd like you to do is to create a storyboard for that little comic strip or something of that dialogue that's going on, and explain how as this is a sin, how could it also be a crime? So this is, the argument is that it's a sin that people would pay taxes to Caesar or treat Caesar as their king and not having God as that. But how could that potentially be a crime as well? That's a little bit more challenging. So some of you might be able to do that, but you should all be able to do that first task. Come back to me when you're done. Okay, so this is where we're going, and this is our last activity for this lesson. I would like you to do a little mini write activity about which is worse, a sin or a crime, and why. Okay, so you're going to do one paragraph about why sins are bad, including quotes or authority, the 7 deadly sins. The second paragraph about why crime is bad, maybe come up with an example, and then you need a conclusion as well. So I'm going to leave that there. Thanks very much for your time. Make sure you get that done. Please make sure you send everything through to your teachers, and we'll be seeing you soon. So take care of yourselves, stay safe, wash hands, and I'll see you soon.